Let's talk about Apple stock symbol AAPL. No doubt, this stock has been under a lot of selling pressure of late. And today you saw a lot of your mega cap stocks or your Mag 7 stocks start to rally. You had Broadcom and you had Nvidia rallying, but you had Apple still lagging significantly behind. It was down 3% today. So while there was a number of tech stocks that were garnering interest from the street, Apple wasn't. In fact, Apple was getting sold while everything else saw that capital that was coming out of Apple going into the other Mag 7 stocks. So what I want to do in this video is I want to analyze the chart for Apple. Is this the time to buy the stock, or do we need to wait for better pricing yet still before considering a long position on Apple? I'm going to use my technical analysis, and we're just going to break down the support and resistance levels and the key price levels that we need to be watching going forward. So in the short term, let's look at what we're dealing with here. We have some resistance overhead. So that means any kind of dead cat bounce that we get out of Apple, we need to see whether or not it can break through this resistance in order to get more bullish on it. Doesn't mean that you can't buy it before then, but if you buy it before it actually tests this resistance, which is honestly, it's not that far from all-time highs if it gets up to this level at 247 versus all-time highs of 260. But if it gets up to this level and you're long and you start seeing it break down and have a sharp reversal similar to what we saw back on February 25th, then yeah, that would be a strong sign to go ahead and bail on the trade. So that's a level that you want to watch going forward. It's only been tested once, so it doesn't have consistent repetitive tests of that level, but nonetheless, it is established, so we want to watch it. Short-term support, and it is sitting right on it. This goes all the way back to October. You can see where it's tested this one, though, multiple times. Unlike the resistance above, you have October 7th resistance, you have November resistance, you have resistance in January, and again here in March. Actually, I didn't mean to say resistance, I meant support. You have those support levels, and it's tested it every time. Now, a lot of people are getting caught up on this 200-day moving average. Oh, Apple broke below the 200-day moving average. That's not a good sign. It's only a bad sign, or it means something, when the stock shows that it has a history of meaning something. You look at Apple and the history of the 200-day moving average, there hasn't been a lot of tests where it has mattered. Yes, we gapped up right here. We came back down and tested it and then moved higher. There was a little bit right here, but by and large, the overall history of the stock, it has largely ignored the 200-day moving average. There's been a few tests here and there where it's mattered, but overall, I don't get too hung up about it breaking below the 200-day moving average. I'd rather find a key level of support that means something that the price has shown to adhere to rather than get caught up in the 200-day moving average on this particular chart. So this support level, it kind of exhibits like a topping kind of a pattern that is yet to confirm. So you have a lot of distribution here at Apple. Yes, it's a wide range going from like 219 all the way up to 260, but this is an area that if it does break down and break below it, you still may see a short-term bounce because of how oversold it is, having simply gone from the end of February from 247 all the way down to 220. You still may see that bounce even if it breaks down below, but ultimately I would think that it will play out to much further to the downside. And how much further is what we want to talk about here. So you have a key support level right here going across. That's at 202. That's about another 10% drop on the stock if it gets down to that level. So 220 or 200 from 220 is a level that I would be paying close attention to. Other levels. This is where it kind of gets interesting because you could draw this line right here and say, okay, there's perhaps some support there. It's only been tested one other time, but still worth keeping on your radar. This goes all the way back to August. But probably more importantly than anything else is this trend line right here. You can see where it comes very close. It's not quite aligned exactly the same as that yellow line. So we'll go ahead and get rid of this, but because of it's being so close, and I'll give preference to this blue line here being much more longer term. And then you have this yellow line right here that goes back. So what you have here essentially is parallel channel bands, and it's traded within these bands going all the way back to 2020. Is yet to break down below it. So if we saw the rejection back in late December at this level, it pulled back, gave you a bounce, another pullback. If this level breaks, it wouldn't surprise me if 200 also falters and comes back down to 190. Now, in order for this to happen, the S&P 500 is going to have a pretty significant sell-off as well. You're going to have to see much more selling pressure in the S&P 500 in order for a move like that in Apple to make sense. Now, another thing that I would say, I talked about the 200-day moving average not meaning much on the daily chart. But look at the 200-week moving average on the Apple chart. And I think there is some significance there. It's been a long time since it's been tested. You have to go all the way back to 2018, the last time the 200-week moving average was officially tested. It got pretty close at numerous times, like what we saw in 2022, again here in 2024, but it never quite gave you a test. But the times that it has tested it, if we go back in time, and let's probably try to shorten this time frame up a little bit here so we can see a little bit more clearly. Here in 2018, that got tested right at the end of the year. You had more tests right there in 2016, and it bounced off of that moving average. Here in 2013, it tested and held that moving average. Even in 2008, in the Great Recession in 2008, and then the bottoming process that took place in late 2008 through 2009. Yes, it did break below it, but it didn't take that next leg lower below that 200-week moving average. Instead, it congregated around it, consolidated, and it led to the bounce that you saw here, thereafter, taking it from, of course, adjusted for stock splits, from the $3 range up to its current price today at $221. But again, you keep going back in time, and you have to go really back to 2004 to a time where it didn't really pay much attention to that level. So let's go ahead and zoom back forward to this. If these channel bands broke, it wouldn't be the craziest thing for it to have a return finally after, 7 years, back to the 200-week moving average, test it, and that could be an incredible buying opportunity if it tests that level and holds it. Now, if it breaks, well, we don't need to get into that technical analysis now, just because it's not really relevant to today's circumstances. But if it breaks, that could mean a much bigger shift in Apple. So going forward, I think what makes this stock so interesting is if it does confirm this topping pattern, doesn't simply give you a bounce back up to the all-time highs. If it breaks down below, what does it do with these different support levels? Even more intriguing from a long-term standpoint, if it gets back down to this 176 level, does that provide a really good support level for it to bounce from, and in the process, an opportunity to get long? If it breaks below those levels, then you really open up the floodgates to how far this one can really drop, maybe down to the 120s or 130s, but that's really not in the here and now. That would take a much bigger, much more prolonged sell-off than what we've seen so far. In order to attain to those levels, it would take a huge market correction. So until we see something like that, you can't get doom and gloom on the stock like Apple. If you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments below, what price target are you aiming to get long on Apple, if at all? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to discuss it with you. Thank you, and God bless.